Last weekend, I went stargazing in the mountains of Oregon, Central Oregon, because I wanted to see if I could get a glimpse of the Neowise comet, this comet that is passing through our stratosphere and won't be seen for another 6,800 years. That's how long it takes for it to travel around the sun. Not in my lifetime. So we had to wait until almost midnight because the light around was still glowing from the sunset. However, the city light pollution was gone. This was out in the middle of nowhere and there was no other light. So I was able to get a few shots. I still could not see the comet with my eyes alone. But when I set the tripod up, set my camera, and opened the aperture for about 40 seconds, then I looked into the afterwards and saw the processing. There it was. I saw it. Right there, it was there. I couldn't see it with my eyes, but it was there in the sky. I also stayed around and I turned because the Milky Way was so vivid, even with my own eyes, behind the mountains. So I turned my camera and took a few more shots of the Milky Way. The stars were incredible of what I could see just alone with my eyes. It was as if God was there saying back to me through those stars, I'm here even though you cannot see me sometimes in daylight. I am here. I am always here with you. Well, today's gospel, the readings remind us that God is always with us and that God is the source of our being and the one who nourishes us and feeds us with life. We hear in the gospel from Matthew today, Jesus feeding a crowd, the first of several feeding stories. Now, dining in biblical times, to feast with someone, to dine with someone, is really an act of faith because it's a commitment to a relationship with that person. It's to be in relationship with them when you sit down and dine. Jesus is inviting us to dine with God, to feast with God. Now, at the beginning of the gospel, Jesus learns of the death of John the Baptist, and he needs to withdraw to a deserted place by himself. That's how the gospel begins. He may be overcome with grief and sadness and trying to figure out what is the meaning of John the Baptist's death in relation to his service in ministry. We don't know, but he needed time alone. And yet, the crowds figure that out and they follow Jesus. And so the disciples are sort of looking like his entourage rather than disciples at this point in the gospel because they're aware that it's getting dark and they're out in the middle of nowhere. And they say to Jesus, this is really a deserted place and it is getting late. So let's dismiss the crowd, have them go to the villages, and let's start this again tomorrow. Because they need to get food and we probably need to eat too. But Jesus says to the disciples, there is no need to disperse them. Give them something to eat yourselves. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not a cook. And if that was a disciple at that time, I'd be really stressed out at that time. Because they said, we all have nothing here but 5 loaves and a couple of fish. The food, the bread and fish, is a symbol of a poor person's meal. And Jesus is almost saying to them, don't worry about it. Bring them here, order them to sit down. And Jesus takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and he models to the crowd and to the disciples, blessing and thanking God, breaking the bread and giving the food to the disciples, and then the disciples give it to the crowds. And from there, everyone eats and has their fill, as if Jesus is modeling, give food yourselves with what you have. And when everyone did that, they had more than enough for everyone. Because Jesus said all those present ate their fill. In the gospel, we hear that. The fragments which remained were gathered up into 12 baskets. Now you have to understand, at the time of Jesus, only the men counted, because only the men were considered basically human. Women, children, girls, and young boys under the age of puberty were considered property and were not counted when census was taken, or say, let's count, like attendance was taken. And yet the gospel notes that everyone who was there, counted or not, had their fill. Everyone was nourished by Christ in this story, reminding us there's a place of compassion within us to feed and nourish one another with who we are and with what we have. And God reminding us, I am here, I am always here, and I am with you. Feed them, give them something to eat. So this week, where is the deserted place, that place of solitude that we need to go to center ourselves, to be by ourselves sometimes and get grounded in who we are as a disciple of Jesus and of God? Also, how in touch are we with our hunger for God, who is inviting us to dine and feast with God in our relationship with others? In what ways are we breaking bread with others? And how do we share our bread with our sisters and brothers that we encounter this week? Because we need both that place of nourishment in solitude and that active place of service in breaking bread. Let us live that life of discipleship this week and our love and service and breaking bread with each other. Amen.